The Krillian hunting fleet materialized at the edge of the Terran system with the confidence of apex predators who had never known defeat. Their ships stretched across the darkness like monuments to conquest, each vessel a masterpiece of killing efficiency. Commander Zarthok stood on the bridge of the flagship Eternal Fang, his 4 eyes gleaming with anticipation as he surveyed the blue-green world that would soon become another trophy in the Krillian Empire's vast collection. For 3,000 cycles, the Krillians had reigned as the galaxy's supreme hunters. Their culture revolved around the pursuit, the chase, the ultimate submission of prey. Every species they encountered had eventually fallen before their superior tactics, their unmatched tracking technology, and their ruthless dedication to the hunt. The ritual was always the same. Identify a promising species, test their defenses, then systematically dismantle their civilization until only scattered survivors remained to tell tales of the terror that had descended from the stars. Zarthok's second-in-command, a scarred veteran named Krelvor, approached with a data tablet clutched in his clawed hand. "Commander, initial scans of the human homeworld are complete. The prey appears to be moderately advanced. They have achieved basic space travel and have established small colonies on their neighboring celestial bodies." The commander's mandibles clicked together in what passed for a Krillian smile. Moderately advanced means moderately entertaining. They will provide sport before they break. He gestured toward the view screen where Earth hung like a jewel against the cosmic backdrop. "What else have the sensors revealed about these humans?" Krelvor consulted his tablet, his expression betraying a hint of confusion. "Something unusual, Commander. Their planet appears to be what the database classifies as a Class 12 death world. Extreme gravitational pull, violent weather systems, abundant predatory life forms, and a remarkably hostile environment by galactic standards." Zarthok's interest sharpened. The Krillians themselves hailed from a relatively peaceful world of gentle plains and docile herbivores. It was perhaps this very ease of living that had driven them to seek challenge and danger across the stars. A species that evolved on a death world might prove more interesting than usual. "Excellent," Zarthok rumbled. "A worthy prey is always preferable to one that surrenders at the first sign of threat. Initiate the standard protocol. Send a hunting party to their largest population centers. We will observe their response to a minor incursion before committing to the full hunt." 3 Krillian scout ships detached from the main fleet, sleek vessels designed for rapid strikes and quick withdrawals. They descended through Earth's atmosphere, their stealth systems making them nearly invisible to the primitive detection arrays the humans used. The lead ship commander, a young hunter eager to prove himself, selected the city of New York as his target. Millions of humans crowded together in towering structures, completely unaware that they had been marked as prey. The Krillian strike came at dawn. Energy weapons lanced down from the sky, carving molten scars across concrete and steel. Humans scattered in panic, their screams echoing through the canyons of buildings as the scout ships swept overhead. The young commander watched with satisfaction as chaos erupted below. This was the typical first response: terror, confusion, and disorganized flight. But then something unexpected happened. Within minutes of the attack, human military forces began converging on the area. Fighter jets screamed through the sky, moving with reckless speed that bordered on suicidal. The Krillian commander barely had time to register the approaching threats before missiles streaked toward his ship. He activated countermeasures, and the missiles exploded harmlessly against his shields, but the sheer velocity and aggression of the response startled him. "These humans have no fear," his weapons officer observed, watching as more jets approached despite the destruction of several of their fellows. "They attack without hesitation." The commander issued orders to withdraw to a safer altitude, but before his ship could ascend, something struck his rear shields with tremendous force. Alarms blared across the bridge as power levels fluctuated. A human weapon had actually managed to damage a Krillian scout ship, something that rarely happened with species at this technology level. In orbit, Zarthok received the reports from the surface teams with growing interest. The humans had responded to the attack not with surrender or negotiation attempts, but with immediate and fierce counterattack. Their weapons were primitive compared to Krillian technology, but they wielded them with a ferocity that spoke of long experience with warfare. "Pull the scouts back," Zarthok ordered. "We need more information before proceeding. This prey has teeth." Over the following solar cycles, the Krillian fleet observed Earth from a distance, their sensors gathering data on human civilization. What they discovered both intrigued and puzzled them. Humans were not a unified species like most spacefaring races. They were divided into hundreds of different nations, cultures, and factions, often engaged in conflicts with one another. Their history was an endless tapestry of warfare, each generation seemingly locked in combat with itself. "They fight constantly," Krelvor reported during a strategy session. "War appears to be their natural state. In just the past single cycle of their planet, they have engaged in dozens of military conflicts. Large ones, small ones, some lasting years, others mere days. They have developed weapons specifically designed to kill other humans in every conceivable environment and situation." Zarthok studied the tactical displays showing various human military installations. "They are predators who prey upon themselves. Fascinating. Most species that reach space travel have evolved beyond internal conflict to this degree." A junior officer ventured a question. "Commander, could this not work to our advantage? If they are so divided, perhaps we could exploit their conflicts, turn them against each other?" The suggestion had merit. It was a tactic the Krillians had used successfully before. Identify the fractures within a species, widen them, and watch as the prey tore itself apart. But as Zarthok continued to review the data, he noticed something else that gave him pause. Despite their divisions, despite their endless conflicts, humans had achieved remarkable things. They had gone from primitive agriculture to space travel in a mere handful of millennia, an evolutionary blink. Their technology advanced at a pace that seemed almost reckless, each generation building upon the last, with little regard for tradition or established wisdom. They were innovators, survivors, creatures who adapted to any environment and turned every challenge into an opportunity. Their world shaped them, Zarthok mused aloud. This death world of theirs, it forged them into something unique. They did not evolve to be the apex predator of their planet. They competed with creatures that could kill them easily. They had no natural weapons, no armor, no particular physical advantages. Yet they conquered their world through intelligence, cooperation, and an apparently limitless capacity for violence. Krelvor nodded slowly. The records show they have survived multiple mass extinction events, global catastrophes that eliminated most other life on their planet. They endured ice ages, supervolcanoes, asteroid impacts. Each time they were pushed to the brink of extinction, and each time they came back stronger. The bridge fell silent as the implications of this information settled over the Krillian command staff. They were accustomed to hunting species that had evolved in relatively stable environments, creatures whose survival instincts had grown dull through countless generations of peace. Humans were different. They were a species that had been tested by their own world, repeatedly, violently, without mercy. Zarthok made his decision. "We proceed with the hunt, but we elevate the threat assessment. These humans are not to be underestimated. Prepare the full battle fleet. We will demonstrate overwhelming force, as is tradition, but we will not assume easy victory." The Krillian fleet moved into attack formation, thousands of ships arranging themselves in the intricate patterns that had brought them victory in countless campaigns. Their weapons powered up, targeting systems locking onto human military installations, communication satellites, and orbital platforms. The humans had detected their presence now and were scrambling to mount some kind of defense, but it seemed futile. What could one primitive species do against the might of the galaxy's greatest hunters? On Earth, emergency broadcasts crackled across every communication channel. World leaders convened in frantic video conferences. Military commanders activated defense protocols that had never been tested against an actual alien invasion. Scientists worked desperately to analyze the technology arrayed against them. And ordinary humans looked up at the sky, seeing the stars themselves blotted out by the massive alien fleet, and felt something ancient stir within their genes. Fear, yes. Terror, certainly. But also something else. Something that had been encoded in human DNA through millions of years of struggling against a hostile universe. The same instinct that had driven their ancestors to hunt woolly mammoths with nothing but spears. The same determination that had carried them across frozen continents and burning deserts. The same stubborn refusal to surrender that had seen them through plague, famine, war, and every disaster their cruel world had thrown at them. Humans did not know how to be prey. Zarthok studied the human communications his fleet had intercepted, his translation software working to decipher their languages. He expected pleas for mercy, desperate attempts at negotiation, perhaps offers of surrender. Instead, he heard something that chilled him despite his vast experience as a hunter. A human military leader, his face scarred and weathered, spoke into a camera with absolute conviction. They think we're going to run. They think we're going to beg. They've clearly never met a human before. We didn't crawl our way to the top of the food chain on a death world just to bow down to some alien tourists who think they're tough. If they want Earth, they're going to have to pry it from our cold, dead hands. And we're going to make them pay for every inch. Other humans echoed similar sentiments across their global communication networks. There was anger, defiance, and an almost eager acceptance of the coming battle. These were not the reactions of a species facing extinction. These were the reactions of a species that had faced extinction before and survived. Zarthok felt something he had not experienced in many cycles: uncertainty. The hunt was supposed to follow a predictable pattern. The prey was supposed to know its place in the natural order, but these humans seemed to have missed that fundamental lesson. They spoke as if they were the predators, not the prey. "Commander," Krelvor's voice interrupted his thoughts. "The human fleet is mobilizing. They're gathering every ship they have and forming a defensive line between us and their homeworld." Zarthok examined the tactical display. The human fleet was laughably small compared to the Krillian armada, barely 100 ships against thousands. Their vessels were crude, held together with primitive materials and powered by chemical reactions that the Krillians had abandoned millennia ago. It would be a slaughter, and yet those human ships did not retreat. They did not attempt to negotiate. They simply formed up in battle lines and waited, their weapons armed, their crews ready to die. It was the behavior of a species that had fought for survival every day of its existence, that saw death not as an ending, but as simply another obstacle to overcome. "They fascinate me," Zarthok admitted quietly. "Part of me regrets that we must destroy them. They would have made worthy adversaries if they had been given more time to develop." Krelvor's mandibles twitched nervously. "Commander, perhaps we should reconsider this hunt. There is something about these humans that troubles me. They should be afraid, but they seem almost eager for battle." But Zarthok shook his head. "We are Krillians. We are the hunters of the galaxy. We do not retreat from prey, no matter how unusual. Besides, it is too late to turn back now. The hunt has begun, and it must continue to its natural conclusion." He raised his claw, preparing to give the order to attack, to unleash the full might of the Krillian Empire upon this strange, defiant species. The humans had no idea what was coming for them. They could not possibly understand the level of destruction that was about to be visited upon their world. Or perhaps, Zarthok thought with a final flicker of doubt, it was the Krillians who did not understand what they had awakened. The first wave of Krillian ships descended like a storm of metal and plasma, their weapons painting the darkness with streaks of deadly energy. Zarthok watched from his command throne as the attack unfolded, expecting to see the human defensive line shatter within moments. Instead, what happened defied every tactical projection his computers had calculated. The human ships scattered, but not in panicked flight. They moved with purpose, breaking formation in ways that seemed chaotic, but proved devastatingly effective. Krillian targeting systems, calibrated for enemies who fought in organized battle groups, struggled to track the wildly maneuvering human vessels. The humans flew like they were insane, throwing their ships through impossible angles, using gravitational forces in ways that should have killed their crews. They're pulling maneuvers that exceed safe tolerance for biological life, Krelvor reported, his voice rising with disbelief. Their pilots should be unconscious or dead from the G-forces they're experiencing. Zarthok leaned forward, fascinated despite the tactical concerns. The humans had compensated for their technological inferiority with pure audacity. Their ships might be slower and their weapons weaker, but they flew them like extensions of their own bodies, exploiting every advantage their knowledge of local space could provide. A human destroyer, its hull scarred and smoking from multiple hits, somehow managed to slip through the Krillian formation and fired its primitive kinetic weapons at point-blank range. The solid projectiles, simple chunks of metal accelerated to tremendous speeds, punched through the shields of a Krillian cruiser. The cruiser's elegant energy barriers, designed to deflect sophisticated plasma weapons, had not been calibrated to stop something as crude as physical ammunition. The cruiser listed to one side, atmosphere venting from multiple breaches. It was not destroyed, but it was wounded, and that simple fact sent a ripple of shock through the Krillian fleet. When was the last time prey had drawn blood in the first engagement? All ships, adjust shield harmonics, Zarthok commanded, forcing his voice to remain calm. Compensate for kinetic projectile weapons. And someone explained to me how a single human ship penetrated our formation. The answer became clear as his tactical officers reviewed the battle data. The human pilot had used debris from a destroyed human vessel as cover, hiding in the sensor shadow created by the wreckage. It was a tactic that required split-second timing, suicidal courage, and an intimate understanding of both human and Krillian sensor technology. Somehow, these primitive creatures had analyzed Krillian systems during their brief previous encounter and had already found exploitable weaknesses. The battle continued to rage across the orbital space around Earth. The Krillian fleet was winning by any objective measure. Human ships were being destroyed at a ratio of 10-1, their defensive lines slowly collapsing under the weight of superior numbers and firepower. But each human ship that died took at least one Krillian vessel with it, and sometimes more. They rammed when their weapons failed. They detonated their own reactors when surrounded. They refused to surrender even when all hope was lost. "These humans fight like cornered animals," one of Zarthok's officers observed, watching as a human frigate, its engines dead and weapons offline, used its last functioning maneuvering thrusters to collide with a Krillian destroyer. "No," Zarthok corrected quietly. "They fight like creatures who have never known anything but struggle. Every instinct they possess screams at them to survive, and they have learned that survival means destroying threats without hesitation or mercy." As the battle wore on, the Krillian fleet began to experience something unprecedented, casualties that mattered. Not the expected minor losses from accidents or equipment failure, but actual combat deaths inflicted by an enemy they had categorized as inferior. The psychological impact rippled through the fleet. Krillian warriors, accustomed to hunting prey that fled or submitted, found themselves facing enemies who seemed genuinely eager to kill them. A communication channel opened unexpectedly, a human transmission breaking through Krillian encryption with surprising ease. A woman's face appeared on the view screen, her expression hard as steel. She wore the insignia of a human admiral, and behind her, Zarthok could see the bridge of a human command ship still locked in combat. "Alien Commander," she said, her voice steady despite the explosions rocking her vessel. "I am Admiral Chen of the United Earth Defense Force. I'm sending this message so there's no confusion about what happens next. You came here thinking we were prey. You made a mistake." Zarthok found himself intrigued despite the situation. This human leader showed no fear, no desperation. She spoke with the confidence of someone holding the superior position, even though her fleet was being systematically destroyed. "You believe you can threaten us?" Zarthok replied, allowing his translation software to convert his words. "Your ships fall before ours like leaves in a storm. Your world will be ours within solar cycles." Admiral Chen smiled, and there was something terrifying in that expression. "You're thinking like hunters, but you should be thinking like prey. You see, while you were busy showing off your pretty fleet and testing our defenses, we were learning. Every shot you've fired, every maneuver you've made, we've been recording and analyzing. Your technology is impressive, but it's not magic. And humans are really, really good at reverse engineering things that try to kill us." Before Zarthok could respond, alarms erupted across his bridge. Multiple human vessels were breaking orbit, not fleeing into deep space as expected, but diving toward Earth's surface at suicidal speeds. Their transponders identified them as cargo ships, heavy transports that had no business being in a combat zone. "What are they doing?" Krelvor demanded, trying to track the descending ships. The answer came minutes later when those cargo ships began launching again, rising from Earth's surface with fresh weapons and supplies. The humans had not just been observing and analyzing, they had been adapting, manufacturing, and deploying countermeasures at a pace that should have been impossible for their technology level. Human ships that had been struggling with Krillian shields suddenly started landing hits with alarming regularity. Their weapons had been modified, adjusted to frequencies that bypassed Krillian defenses. It was crude adaptation, not elegant engineering, but it was effective. The humans were learning in the middle of battle, evolving their tactics and technology in real time through sheer desperate innovation. "This is impossible," a Krillian tactical officer protested. "They cannot adapt this quickly. It takes cycles of research and testing to modify weapon systems." "They are not bound by our sense of caution," Zarthok realized. "They are implementing untested solutions in combat, accepting the risks because the alternative is extinction. We would never risk deploying unproven technology, but they have no such reservations." The Krillian fleet still held the advantage in numbers and raw power, but the ease of the expected victory had evaporated. What was supposed to be a hunt had become a war, and the Krillians were discovering they had no experience with actual warfare. Their entire military doctrine was built around intimidation, overwhelming force, and the psychology of predator versus prey. But humans refused to be prey. Zarthok made a decision that would have been unthinkable at the start of the engagement. "Pull back to high orbit. We need to reassess our strategy." The Krillian fleet withdrew, leaving the shattered remnants of the human defensive line behind. It was not a retreat, Zarthok told himself. It was a tactical repositioning. But he could see the doubt in the eyes of his officers, could sense the uncertainty that had infected his proud fleet. During the lull in combat, Krillian analysts worked furiously to understand what had gone wrong. Their reports painted a disturbing picture. Humans were not just technologically creative, they were psychologically adapted for endless conflict in ways the Krillians had never encountered. Their history was an unbroken chain of warfare, each generation learning from the last, each conflict adding to a collective knowledge of how to fight and survive. They have terms for types of warfare we have never conceived, one analyst reported. Guerrilla warfare, asymmetric warfare, total warfare, psychological warfare. They have studied conflict like we study hunting. It is woven into every aspect of their civilization. Even more concerning were the intercepted human communications. Instead of despair at their losses, humans were analyzing the battle with clinical detachment. Military academies across Earth were already teaching courses on Krillian fleet tactics. Engineers were sharing designs for new weapons specifically calibrated to exploit weaknesses in Krillian technology. Scientists were proposing theories about Krillian biology and psychology, looking for any advantage that could be gained. And most disturbing of all, humans were volunteering by the millions to join the fight. They were not being conscripted or coerced. They were choosing to fight, to throw themselves against an enemy that vastly outmatched them in technology and numbers. The concept was alien to Krillian thinking. Why would prey volunteer to face hunters? It is their death world, Krelvor suggested during a strategy meeting. On their planet, the choice was always fight or die. There was no safety, no moment when they could rest without vigilance. They evolved to see every threat as something to be destroyed rather than avoided. Zarthok studied the tactical displays, his confidence shaken for the first time in his long career as a hunter. Send word to the Krillian High Council. Inform them that the subjugation of the human species may require additional fleets. The request for reinforcements was humiliating, but necessary. As Zarthok looked at Earth hanging in the view screen, he could not shake the feeling that he had made a terrible mistake. The Krillians had come expecting to find prey. Instead, they had found something much more dangerous, a species that had spent its entire evolutionary history fighting for survival against a universe that wanted it dead. On Earth's surface, humans were preparing for the next phase of the conflict with characteristic intensity. Factories ran at full capacity, churning out weapons and ships. Scientists worked around the clock, driven by the knowledge that human survival depended on their innovations. Soldiers trained with a desperation born from understanding that the alien hunters in orbit wanted to eradicate their entire species. But there was also something else happening, something that no Krillian sensor could detect or analyze. Humanity was unifying in ways it never had before. Old rivalries and conflicts faded in the face of an existential threat. Nations that had been enemies for generations were sharing technology and resources. People who had never agreed on anything were finding common cause in survival. The Krillians had assumed that human division would be a weakness to exploit. Instead, it became a strength. Every culture brought its own perspective on combat. Every nation contributed its unique approaches to warfare. The collective knowledge of thousands of years of human conflict across hundreds of different civilizations was being pooled, synthesized, and weaponized against an enemy who had never faced such diversity of tactical thinking. Admiral Chen stood in a command bunker deep beneath Earth's surface, surrounded by representatives from every major human government. On the screens around her, data flowed in from the orbital battle, from intelligence-gathering operations, from scientific research teams. Humanity's entire industrial and intellectual capacity had been turned toward a single purpose: survival. "They're going to come back," she said to the assembled leaders. "And when they do, they'll bring more ships, better tactics. They're learning from this engagement just like we are." A general from the Eurasian Alliance nodded grimly. "Then we need to make sure we learn faster. What's our timeline on the new weapon systems?" 72 hours until the first mass-produced models are ready, a scientist reported. "We've managed to replicate some aspects of their energy weapons. They're crude compared to the originals, but they'll be effective." Admiral Chen allowed herself a thin smile. 72 hours. We went from not knowing aliens existed to manufacturing copies of their weapons in less than a month. If those hunters in orbit knew how fast we adapt, they'd be running already. But in orbit, Zarthok was not running. He was planning, calculating and preparing for a hunt that had become far more complicated than any he had led before. The Krillian Empire would not be denied its prey. They would simply need to be more brutal, more overwhelming, more thorough in their destruction of human resistance. What neither the Krillians nor the humans fully understood yet was that this conflict had already transcended a simple hunt. It had become a test of two fundamentally different evolutionary paths. The Krillians, who had evolved as hunters on a gentle world and sought challenge in the stars, and the humans, who had been forged in fire and violence, who had learned that the universe showed no mercy and expected none in return. The next phase of the conflict was about to begin, and neither side could predict how it would end. The Krillian reinforcement fleet arrived 6 solar cycles later, doubling the size of the armada surrounding Earth. Zarthok greeted the newcomers with mixed feelings. Part of him was relieved to have additional resources. Another part resented the implication that he could not complete the hunt with his original forces. The commander of the reinforcements, a decorated hunter named Varkesh, made no effort to hide his contempt for what he saw as Zarthok's failure. "You have allowed prey to bloody your nose," Varkesh observed, his 4 eyes gleaming with barely concealed amusement. "Perhaps you have grown soft in your success, Commander. Step aside and let me show you how a proper hunt is conducted." Zarthok's pride stung, but he maintained his composure. "These humans are unlike any prey we have encountered. You will learn this truth yourself, Varkesh, and I suspect the lesson will be painful." Varkesh dismissed the warning with a gesture of his claws. All prey claimed to be special, unique, dangerous, and all prey eventually submit or die. These humans will be no different. The combined Krillian fleet began its assault with overwhelming force. Energy weapons scoured Earth's surface, targeting military installations, communication hubs, and industrial centers. Orbital bombardment reduced cities to rubble, turning humanity's proudest achievements into smoking craters. From space, it appeared that the Krillians were finally breaking the human resistance, that the prey was learning its place in the natural order. But appearances were deceiving. The humans had anticipated the bombardment and had spent the brief respite preparing for exactly this scenario. Critical personnel and equipment had been moved deep underground into bunker complexes that could withstand anything short of planet-cracking weapons. Manufacturing facilities had been dispersed and hidden, making them difficult to target from orbit. And most importantly, humans had continued to adapt and innovate at a pace that left the Krillians struggling to keep up. When the first wave of Krillian landing craft descended to Earth's surface, intending to hunt down survivors and break human morale, they found themselves in an environment far more hostile than anticipated. Human guerrilla fighters attacked from concealed positions, using knowledge of local terrain that no amount of Krillian scanning technology could match. The hunters found themselves hunted, ambushed in forests, mountains, and ruined cities by enemies who seemed to appear from nowhere and vanish just as quickly. A Krillian hunting party, 50 strong and equipped with the finest weapons the Empire could provide, pursued a group of human fighters into the ruins of what had once been Paris. The hunters spread out in standard formation, sensors active, confident in their ability to corner and eliminate their prey. They had hunted on 1,000 worlds, tracking countless species to extinction. A handful of primitive humans should have been trivial to eliminate. The ambush came from every direction simultaneously. Humans had mined the ruins with improvised explosives, had established firing positions on every vertical surface, had turned the destroyed city into a 3-dimensional killing field. The Krillian hunting party found itself surrounded, outmaneuvered, and systematically destroyed by enemies who fought with a combination of desperation and tactical brilliance that defied all expectations. Of the 50 Krillian hunters, only 3 survived to retreat, and they brought with them troubling reports. The humans were not just resisting, They were winning ground-level engagements, using intimate knowledge of their world and a willingness to sacrifice anything for victory. The prey was killing the hunters with alarming consistency. Varkesh reviewed the combat reports with growing fury. "This is unacceptable. We are the greatest hunters in the galaxy. We cannot be defeated by a species that barely understands faster-than-light travel." "Perhaps that is precisely why they are defeating us," Zarthok suggested quietly. "We think like hunters. We stalk, we intimidate, we dominate through superior force and fear. But humans have spent their entire history fighting enemies that were stronger, faster, and more deadly than they were. They learned to win through intelligence, cooperation, and absolute refusal to accept defeat." Varkesh snarled at the perceived criticism. "You speak as if you admire them." "I respect them," Zarthok corrected. "There is a difference. Respect for one's prey does not mean sympathy. It means understanding the threat they pose and adapting accordingly." But adaptation was not the Krillian strength. Their hunting methods had worked unchanged for millennia, refined to near perfection against thousands of species. The concept of fundamentally changing their approach was alien to their culture. They were hunters, and hunters did not change to suit prey. As weeks turned to months, the stalemate continued. The Krillian fleet controlled orbital space, but could not fully suppress human resistance on the surface. Humans controlled their planet, but could not break the orbital blockade. Both sides bled, suffered losses, and searched desperately for a decisive advantage. What finally shifted the balance was not military might, but something the Krillians had never anticipated: diplomacy. Admiral Chen stood before a holographic communication array, not addressing the Krillian fleet, but speaking to the galaxy beyond. Human signals, boosted by jury-rigged transmitters and carried on frequencies the Krillians had not thought to jam, reached out to the stars. Her message was simple, direct, and devastating to Krillian ambitions. "To all species capable of receiving this transmission, we are humanity of Earth. We are currently under attack by a species that calls themselves Krillians. They came to our world not as explorers or diplomats, but as hunters seeking prey. We have one question for the civilized species of the galaxy. How many of you have they hunted before? How many of your people have been murdered for sport by these creatures who claim superiority through violence?" The transmission included footage from the conflict, images of Krillian ships bombarding civilian centers, recordings of Krillian commanders discussing humans as prey and the Earth as a hunting preserve. It was a public relations catastrophe for the Krillian Empire, one that could not be suppressed or denied. Responses began to arrive from across the galaxy. Species that had suffered under Krillian hunts, survivors of worlds that had been depopulated or destroyed, witnesses to atrocities that the Krillian Empire had committed in the name of sport. The chorus of voices was damning, and it included some of the most powerful civilizations in known space. The Galactic Coalition, a loose association of advanced species that maintained interstellar peace, issued a formal condemnation of the Krillian actions. Economic sanctions were proposed. Trade routes were closed. Krillian diplomats found themselves isolated and shunned. The empire that had ruled through fear was discovering that their reign had created enemies across the galaxy, enemies who had been waiting for an opportunity to strike back. On the bridge of the Eternal Fang, Zarthok read the incoming messages with a sinking feeling in his thorax. "We are being called monsters," he said softly. "Barbarians. Genocidal hunters who deserve extermination." "Lies and propaganda," Varkesh insisted, but his voice lacked conviction. "The prey is manipulating others against us." "Or perhaps," Zarthok replied, "the prey is revealing truths about us that we refuse to acknowledge. We have spent 3,000 cycles hunting for sport, destroying civilizations for entertainment. We told ourselves it was our right as the superior species. But the humans have shown the galaxy what we really are, bullies who prey on the weak and run when faced with genuine resistance. The political pressure from the Galactic Coalition was one problem. The more immediate problem was the effect the conflict was having on Krillian society itself. Reports from the homeworld indicated growing unrest. Families mourned hunters who had fallen to human weapons. Economic concerns mounted as resources were poured into a conflict that showed no signs of resolution. And most troubling, young Krillians were beginning to question the wisdom of a culture built entirely around the hunt. Humans, meanwhile, had used the breathing room provided by galactic diplomacy to further strengthen their position. New weapons came online daily, each generation more effective than the last. Human ships, while still inferior to Krillian vessels in raw power, had become deadly through superior tactics and crews willing to take risks that would horrify their enemies. And the industrial capacity of an entire world devoted to warfare was beginning to tell. The turning point came during what the Krillians planned as their final decisive assault. Every ship in the combined fleet was committed to a massive orbital bombardment followed by ground invasion. It was meant to be overwhelming, unstoppable, the kind of force that would finally break human resistance. Instead, it became a disaster. Humans had spent months analyzing Krillian fleet movements, weapons signatures, and communication protocols. They had learned to predict Krillian tactics with uncomfortable accuracy. When the assault began, humans were ready with countermeasures that should not have been possible for their technology level. Missiles launched from hidden surface installations, targeted with precision that suggested humans had broken Krillian encryption. Human ships, thought to be destroyed or in hiding, emerged from the shadows of Earth's moon and struck at vulnerable targets in the Krillian formation. And most devastatingly, a virus, crude but effective, infected Krillian computer systems through their own communication networks. The virus did not destroy Krillian systems. It did something worse. It made them unreliable. Weapons fired at wrong coordinates. Shields flickered at critical moments. Navigation systems provided false data. The elegant, coordinated assault dissolved into chaos as Krillian commanders lost confidence in their own equipment. Varkesh's flagship, caught in the midst of the confusion, took concentrated fire from multiple human vessels. His shields failed at a critical moment, and a human railgun round punched through his bridge. Varkesh died instantly, along with most of his command staff. The hunter who had come to show humans their place had been killed by the very prey he had dismissed as insignificant. Zarthok assumed command of the combined fleet and made the hardest decision of his life. All ships, withdraw from Earth orbit. Retreat to the system's edge. The order was met with shocked silence. Krillians did not retreat. Hunters did not flee from prey. But the alternative was the complete destruction of both fleets, and Zarthok had seen enough to know that humans would accept that outcome if it meant denying the Krillians victory. As the Krillian fleet withdrew, human ships harried them but did not pursue aggressively. Admiral Chen understood that allowing the enemy an escape route often prevented the desperate last stands that cost both sides dearly. She watched the alien fleet depart with grim satisfaction. Humanity had survived. Against all odds, against an enemy vastly superior in technology and numbers, they had survived. But Chen knew this was not truly a victory. It was a temporary reprieve. The Krillians might return, or other threats might emerge from the galaxy. Earth had announced its presence to the cosmos in the most violent way possible, and that message would have consequences. In the weeks following the Krillian withdrawal, humanity debated its next steps. Some argued for isolationism, building defenses, and staying hidden from galactic attention. Others insisted that Earth needed to engage with other species, to build alliances and establish humanity's place among the stars. Admiral Chen advocated for a middle path. "We've proven we can fight. Now we need to prove we can do more than fight. The galaxy needs to see humans as potential allies, not just dangerous survivors. Across the galaxy, the news of the Krillian defeat spread like wildfire. A primitive species, barely capable of interstellar travel, had fought off the most feared hunters in known space. It was unprecedented, shocking, and it changed how every spacefaring civilization viewed both humans and Krillians. The Krillian Empire entered a period of introspection and turmoil. Zarthok, returning to the homeworld in disgrace, found himself at the center of a cultural revolution. Young Krillians, horrified by the losses suffered in the human war, questioned the value of the hunt. Why should their society be built around violence and domination? What had 3,000 cycles of hunting really brought them besides isolation and enemies? Zarthok himself became an unexpected voice for change. In testimony before the Krillian High Council, he spoke of what he had learned from humans. They are not just survivors. They are builders, innovators, and yes, warriors when necessary. But warfare is not their identity. They fight when threatened, then return to creating, exploring, living. Perhaps it is time we learn to be more than hunters. The words were heresy to traditional Krillians, but they resonated with a younger generation tired of endless conflict. The empire that had defined itself through the hunt began to slowly, painfully transform into something different. On Earth, humanity rebuilt with characteristic determination. The scars of the Krillian attack would take years to heal, but already new cities rose from the ruins. More importantly, humanity had crossed a threshold. They were no longer a single planet bound by gravity and ignorance. They were a spacefaring species, aware of their place in a vast and often hostile galaxy. Human ships, improved with lessons learned from Krillian technology, began to venture beyond their solar system. They explored with caution, knowing that dangers existed among the stars. But they also explored with hope, seeking allies, knowledge, and new frontiers. First contact with other species was awkward at first. Many civilizations viewed humans with suspicion, remembering how they had fought the Krillians with such ferocity. But others saw potential in these strange creatures from the death world. Humans were survivors, innovators, and as it turned out, surprisingly good diplomats when they chose to be. Trade relationships formed, scientific collaborations began, and slowly, humanity found its niche in galactic civilization. They became known as the species you wanted as allies and feared as enemies. Their ships served as mercenaries, protecting trade routes from pirates. Their engineers helped other species solve problems through unorthodox thinking. Their diplomats negotiated treaties with a practical wisdom born from millennia of internal conflicts. Years after the war, Admiral Chen, now serving as humanity's first ambassador to the Galactic Coalition, encountered Zarthok at a diplomatic function. The former hunter commander had become an advocate for Krillian reform, working to transform his species into something more than predators. They shared a moment of understanding, these two former enemies who had shaped each other's destinies. "We taught each other lessons," Chen observed. "You taught us that the galaxy is dangerous. We taught you that being dangerous is not the same as being superior." Zarthok's mandibles clicked in what humans had learned to recognize as agreement. "My people believed we were apex predators, but you showed us that in nature, apex predators often go extinct when their environment changes. It is the adaptable survivors who endure." The conversation was brief, but it symbolized the changes rippling across the galaxy. The Krillians were learning to be more than hunters. Humans were learning to be more than survivors, and the cosmos was richer for having both species grow beyond their original natures. Earth's night sky, once filled with the threatening glow of an enemy fleet, now sparkled with the lights of human stations, trading posts, and exploratory vessels. Children looked up at those lights and dreamed of the future, of worlds yet to be explored, species yet to be met, and challenges yet to be overcome. Humanity had survived first contact with a hostile alien species. They had fought, adapted, and ultimately prevailed not through superior technology or numbers, but through the same traits that had carried them through every crisis in their violent history: resilience, innovation, cooperation, and an absolute refusal to surrender. The cosmic hunters had believed they dominated the stars. They had come to Earth expecting easy prey. Instead, they found humans, and nothing in the galaxy would ever be quite the same again. The species from the Death World had announced their presence, and the message was clear. Humanity had arrived, and they were here to stay.